Good afternoon everyone, this is AJ the Movie Owl, back again. Today I want to take a look at the Punisher on-screen appearances, his films, TV, that sort of thing. This is a companion piece to my 8-part Punisher comic series, but dedicated to the movies. So yeah, so a little bit about me first, and my history with the character. So I've read Punisher comics for the better part of 30 odd years. Started in the sort of early 80s, mid 80s, worked my way backwards, picked up everything. Prior to that, the Punisher was first conceived in 1974. His first appearance was in The Amazing Spider-Man issue 129. He was created as an antagonist for Spider-Man, but went on to become very popular, so they turned him into an anti-hero, which pretty much was always the plan for him. He was created by writer Jerry Conway and artist John Romita. Yeah, so I'm a big Punisher fan. You know, I mean, I've got Punisher tattoos. When I was younger, I wouldn't do that now. Obviously I've got a t-shirt, I've got statues and posters, and you know, big Punisher fan. I followed the character all the way through up till now and to present, regardless of artist, writer, quality of the books. I've been there all the way through. So obviously the Punisher films are something that are close to me in that sense. So Punisher was big in the mid 80s, and that led us to our first Punisher film, which was starred Dolph Lundgren in the title role of Punisher Frank Castle. Came out in 1989. It went straight to video in this country. I'm not entirely sure about if it had a theatrical release or not in the States. It may well have done in some other territories. I'm unsure. The film deviated from his origin. Now in the comics, the Punisher's origin was that his family were murdered. It was a fluke. It wasn't like he'd done anything. They were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. His family members, they were in the park out on a picnic. They come across like a mob hit, see a little bit too much, and are ultimately gunned down there and then, with Frank being the only survivor. And then he becomes the Punisher, and fights a one-man war on terror, on crime, doing what the police can't do. Now the thing with the character in the comics is that he never knew who killed his family. Yeah, that was always the backstory. He never knew who it was. And in doing so, that's why he had this war of crime. It wasn't a vengeance story as such. It was like, because he would never have known whether he actually killed the people that killed his family. So he went after everyone who was a criminal. That's how it worked. The film's kind of deviated from this slightly and made it more of a revenge kick. They're all quite guilty of that. But anyway, so the 1989 film starring Dolph Lundgren. The film also starred Louis Gossett Jr., who was quite a big actor at the time in the 80s. He starred in the Iron Eagle films, I believe. You may have to correct me. He was in Enemy Mine with Dennis Quaid as the alien under all the makeup. Very good actor. So that brings me to the releases. So this here is a UK steelbook release of that very film. The Guilty Will Be Punished. Dolph Lundgren, the Punisher. This logo here is the logo that was actually created for the 2004 Thomas Jane film that they placed on here embossed. There was never a design for the skull for this film because the Punisher never wore a skull shirt. So it could come across just as an 80s Dolph Lundgren action film. In that respect, it's pretty good. It's got some good action set pieces. It's not a big budgeted film by any means, but it's good in its sense. It was heavily edited here in the UK on release. because of all the ninja sort of stuff. We had it with the Turtles as well, where you couldn't call them Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles. So in this, there's a lot of sort of violence with throwing stars and things like this, which had to be edited. So it was very odd in that someone would throw a star and instantly you'd see the impact. There was no sort of time frame between one and the other, even though there's a distance. So it was quite, but that's down to the editing in this country. The film obviously follows Frank Castle. He's established as the Punisher already. He's being chased by Louis Gossett Jr., who's a policeman, but an old partner of his as well, who teams up with this female officer to track Frank down. There's a war going on between the mob bosses in the city and the Yakuza, who want to take over the crime and run the crime within the city. So there's a bit of a clash there, and it culminates in the Yakuza kidnapping all the children belonging to the crime families. Frank goes in and rescues said children, bar one, and he has to team up with one of the crime family bosses to go and rescue this child from the Yakuza and take down the Yakuza. Don't get me wrong, it's not a flashy film, it's not big budgeted film, but it is a lot of fun. It's a nostalgic film for me in that it came out at the right time when I was big into the Punisher, and at the time obviously we didn't have many superhero films. We'd had Batman just come out, you had the Superman films, Marvel were knocking out fair, like the Captain America movie from that sort of era, the Fantastic Four that never came out. So yeah, it's a low budget Punisher movie starring Dolph Lundgren. Dolph Lundgren was fine with it. In it, he kicks around in the sewers in it. There's an odd naked scene where he's sort of praying to God. But if you ain't seen it, it's a lot of fun. So yeah, that's the Steelbook. But also, I have this release here. Now I did have this on UK Amaray, but I sold it, and I opted for the German version, which is this box here. Nice cover art. That's the classic picture. Got his motorbike behind him, with the logo that is a Punisher. That's the comic logo, the comic accurate logo, but more metallic than whatever looked on the comics. So this is a 2-disc version. It's got some nice disc art as well, and it's a flip sleeve, because generally in Germany you get big age rating like that. So a lot of 90% of their releases have a flip cover, so you can display it without that silly square age rating box. Now with this, the film runs at an average 1 hour 29 minutes, hour and a half film. It goes pretty quick. It's worth watching. With the German release, it also gets a work print. Now, a work print is exactly what it says it is. It's like a rough and ready, or rough and not ready version of the Punisher before it's tarted up for release. So in that being, the work print has actually got additional scenes that were never included in the theatrical run or the release of the film. I believe Germany might be the only place where you can find it with the work print. Hence why you have on here, you have the film there and you have bonus material. The work print is on the bonus disc. So yeah, worth picking up for that reason. Like I said, it's like watching a rough cut, an early edit of the film where, imagine watching a film where the effects ain't totally finished, that sort of thing. But well worth picking up for that reason. So an enjoyable fare. Shame he didn't have the Punisher logo. I guess Marvel weren't, or they weren't confident enough with that look for the character. And given the era it came from, it makes sense that he's it's the action era, isn't it? The 80s. So what happened then was that we wouldn't see the Punisher on screen again for some time. His next film came in 2004. In this, The Punisher, starring Thomas Jane in the title character. Now this has got a great cast, right? And I've got history with this film. So let's go through the cast first. So you've got Thomas Jane as Frank Castle, the Punisher. You've got John Travolta as the villain, Howard Saint. Now, John Travolta was coming off of, obviously, things like in the mid-90s, he'd done Pulp Fiction. He was quite big for a while coming into this. You've also got a young Ben Foster playing a character called Dave. In the comics, he's known as Spacker Dave. He's the fella with all the metallic piercings. You have Rebecca Romaine, who previously played in the first three X-Men films. She played Mystique. She plays a character called Joan. And you have, I can't remember his name, he was the villain in The Postman. And Kevin Costner. You probably ain't seen The Postman. Good film, check it out. Anyway, this is the back of the steelbook. Now, this was a release, the cover of the standard Amaray sort of release. I don't like this cover at all. I dislike it. I like that. That's very nice. And interior, you have one disc, Blu-ray, and that image there. Now, again, with this film, also, sorry, I forgot. How did I forget? It stars the late, great Roy Scheider from Jaws. He's in that as well, playing the father of Frank Castle. How could I forget that? Right? So this film's got a great cast. A little bit about the history with me in this film. Obviously, I've gone into how big of a Punisher fan I am. Favourite comic book character. Read for years, up till now, blah, blah, blah. So, in 2004 in the US, this was released on the 16th of April. Yeah. Now, 16th of April is actually my birthday. Right, so you can imagine how stoked I was to hear, yes, a Punisher film's coming out, my favourite character, really looking forward to this, he's got the skull, everything, and it's coming out on my birthday. What's not to like, other than I'm in the UK, and obviously that was the US, but still, it was like, hey, birthday present. Now, obviously, I got to see the film before the cinematic release over here in the UK, because a Region 1 DVD had come out prior to the UK theatrical release. The UK theatrical release was on the 24th of September 2004, a date that will live in infamy with me also, because that morning, lovely day, sun was out, was riding to work on my motorbike, car pulled out in front of me, bam, had a really serious accident where my whole face was scarred up. I had scarring going around my eye, my nose was ripped apart, you can see a line going across it, big gash there, all over the eyelids, I had scarring, I had 56 stitches to seal this back up. The offer of plastic surgery to get rid of it, I said no to that. I believe of living with my scars. I couldn't walk for 5 months. Yes, I did get back on a motorbike again. I don't ride a motorbike now, but I did get back on one. Yeah, so it was a lovely day. The visor was up. That's how this occurred. I must have hit the face palm the floor. The visor's gone into my face and tore it apart. Anyway, so you can see how that year, right, being a big Punisher fan, #1 my birthday, released in this country, I nearly died in a motorbike crash. I didn't. I'm still here talking now. So anyway, back to the story. So yeah, so Frank Castle, aka the Punisher, Tom Jane, he's like a DEA agent type thing in this, and he goes undercover, and it results in the death of one of Howard Saint's sons. Obviously, Frank Castle's to blame. Howard Saint, or more to say, Howard Saint's wife, says that she wants his whole family killed. So, his whole family gets killed. Literally everyone. He ain't got a son and daughter like he does historically. He's just got a son, but his wife gets murdered, his son gets murdered, his dad gets murdered, his mum gets murdered, aunts, uncles, nephews, flipping everyone you can think of, his sisters, aunts, families, dogs, cat that it chases, I don't know, everyone gets murdered. And it's quite brutal in that sense. A lot of people die. So he nearly gets killed himself. He comes back. Yeah, it's a good film. It's directed by I've lost it. Jonathan Hensley. Sorry, my mind drew a blank. It's directed by Jonathan Hensley, who actually I've done a recent review of one of his latest films, which is The Ice Road with Mel Gibson. So you can go and check that out. Just an aside, that film was the Punisher had seen a resurgence in the comics from the early 2000s with a storyline called Welcome Back, Frank. This was written by a famous comic book writer called Garth Ennis and drawn by Steve Dillon. This is the book here. All right, now I'm only bringing this into it because this influenced that film. Without this, you wouldn't have had that, or that version of that film. The characters of the Russian, Spacker Dave, Bumbo, I think his name is, the big guy who likes cooking, and Joan were all taken from this book. Because obviously the Punisher's a bit of a one-dimensional character in that, you know, he's pretty simplistic in what he does. So they had to have a strong support cast around him, which this comic gave. So just to show you, if I open this up here, you can see the Russian. Obviously he you know, he's fighting Frank Castle considerably. The whole fight scene in the film is pretty much taken from this book. Bit where he throws a toilet at him. Yeah, he gets hit by the toilet in the film. The slamming of the fridge, his head in the fridge, as you can see there. Yeah. Now, if anyone's interested in reading The Punisher, and you haven't read The Punisher, I would suggest starting here. Welcome Back, Frank. That's what it's called. There's the hardback version. It's a great jumping on point for anyone interested in The Punisher. Yeah, well worth it. So, that was the steelbook we had a look at, but then also I got an Amaray. Now, I had the UK Amaray released, but I sold it, and I opted for the German. Now, this is the German release. Again, has 2 discs, extended cut and uncut version, with the flip case on the interior with the silly logo. Nice red case, probably look better in black considering it is all black. But yeah, so now when this was released on DVD, it was given an additional, it was a special edition released with an additional beginning. The beginning was animated. It told a bit of Frank's time during being in Afghanistan or Iraq or somewhere like that. But it was fully animated. It was a scene that was meant to be in the film and made for the film, but unfortunately they didn't have the budget to do that with it. So, but when I bought this, I was very surprised, as I didn't know that there's a version on here that actually runs for 139 minutes. And another version that's 123 minutes. So the 123 minutes is the uncut, but the extended version runs for a whopping 139 minutes. I never knew that existed. So I watched it, not knowing that I was watching an extended cut like that. I was expecting it to be the one with the animated start, which it hasn't got the animated start. But this has in it loads of a subplot involving the Punisher's pal, a character called Jimmy Weeks, who worked with him as a DEA agent, who gets into a bit of a cash flow problem by gambling in one of Howard Saint's casinos, and ended up owing a load of money, and they use that as leverage over the guy to find out Frank Castle's whereabouts, you know, and all that sort of stuff. This is a subplot, obviously, and Frank being Frank, he didn't take that too well. But anyway, so if you're a fan of this film and you're not aware of that, go to Amazon Germany and pick this up. It is well worth it. I believe, again, Germany is the only place to get that and to get the work print on that one. Yeah, visit Amazon Germany. Thank you, Amazon. Anyway, so Thomas Jane, he was great in the role. Yeah. Great cast, great film, a lot of good action. I can't fault the film. The film was a moderate success, so much so that they did speak about a sequel. There was a spin-off PS2 game which I've played to the end, voiced by Thomas Jane, and again takes heavily from that film and the Punisher comics. So a sequel was spoke about, but we wouldn't see the sequel until the year 2008. Thomas Jane was very vocal about the character. He loved the character. He wanted more to do with his character. He wanted to breathe life into it. You know, he knew the character inside out. You know, he loved it. He loved the character. But after 4 years of pushing for a sequel that never came, he finally said, look, I've got to step away from this and you know, say goodbye to it. Funny thing is, it kind of seemed like immediately, as soon as that happened, there was news of a sequel or another film. I won't call it a sequel because it's not a direct sequel. There are some changes, which was quite upsetting because Tom Jane was great. But Tom Jane would come back as the Punisher. He came back for an unofficial fan film kind of thing called Dirty Laundry. It's about 10 minutes long. Ron Perlman stars in it as well, and you can see it on YouTube. So that's The Punisher, Dirty Laundry. People raved about it. I have seen it. For me personally, yeah, it's nice to see Tom Jane back in the role. It just sort of rubs it in that we didn't get him in the sequel. But there you go. Check out Dirty Laundry. And he did do that after this film. So in 2008, we were treated to Lexi Alexander, she's the director, Punisher Warzone. Now the title Warzone does come from the comics. There is a comic series called Warzone, and there was another one called War Journal. It went War Journal, then Warzone. Punisher, Punisher War Journal, Punisher Warzone. They cast Ray Stevenson in the lead role as the Punisher. Now Ray Stevenson was hot off of Rome, the TV series, and he has appeared in stuff since. He was in Dexter at one point. It also stars Julie Benz, who was in Buffy quite a bit, and Dexter season 1 to 4, and Dominic West, British actor. He played a character called Billy, who became Jigsaw, as you can see there, and it also starred Wayne Knight as Micro. You recognise him from Basic Instinct, Jurassic Park, Space Jam, that sort of thing. So, aesthetically, this film was completely different. It's a lot darker, it's grittier, it's more vibrant in the sense that there's a lot of neon lighting throughout the film. It's got a more comic book-esque feel. The violence is ramped up, the blood and the gore. Now, Ray Stevenson as the Punisher, when I watched it, I had no issue with him. He looks the part. This guy looks like the Punisher. The image behind me was made in the early 2000s. And you can see a sort of resemblance between the two. So he looked the part. He was good as the Punisher. But the film didn't do very well. It's a mixed bag. It had a confusing tone to it because on the one hand you had the violence, but you had the comic book, you had the darkness, but you had the the glowy colours at points, and you had humour thrown in at points where Jigsaw's concerned, and it just didn't work for it. So yeah, I don't know. So this is like I said, this uncut version. I can't say if there's any difference because I've not actually watched it. This is the German release yet again. I had the Amaray UK release. I sold it and opted for the German release. Like I said, whether uncut is uncut, I can't tell you at this stage. I recently changed over and yet to watch it. But I prefer the cover design to the UK one. Yeah, so that is Marvel Knights The Punisher. Yeah, so moving on. All right, before we get to the sort of Netflix stuff, I do have 2 animated Marvel films. One called Avengers Confidential, Black Widow and the Punisher. And Iron Man Rise of Technivore, which again stars the Punisher. I can't remember nothing about these. I saw them ages ago. Just thought I'd show them to you as Punisher. They're DVDs, not released on Blu-ray. Not in this region anyway. just a little aside about Punisher appearances, because that's what I'm talking about. So, that 2008 film was the final time we got Punisher in a live-action movie. Yeah, so what happened next? Well, Netflix kicked off with their TV series that were supposedly within the MCU, but weren't. They're not in the MCU, people. So the Punisher came back in Daredevil Season 2. He was in half the season, pretty much, played by John Bernthal, who he was Rick's best mate in Walking Dead, started Walking Dead. He was in Wolf of Wall Street, among quite a few other bits. Baby Driver, I believe he was in. Now, he came back in this, very violent, very... He played a good, different Punisher at this point, in that you felt the PTSD within him. You know, you felt him suffer. You felt the suffering of him. That was good. It ultimately led into 2 seasons of the Punisher Netflix series. 10 episodes apiece. Season 1, Season 2. Now, people say that he's the best Punisher. I don't agree. I don't agree with that. That's said by people who think they know the Punisher, but don't know the Punisher. I know the Punisher, and I know John Bernthal is not the best Punisher. All right, that's held by Thomas Jane, hands down. Bernthal was good. Now the problem with this show is that they never seem to have him as the Punisher. It always seemed to be his journey to becoming the Punisher. So he was kind of like the Punisher in that, and he went on trial and all this stuff, went to prison, broke out. But then when it got to this, there was almost like a sense of a reset, like he stepped away from being the Punisher. So he goes on this journey to becoming the Punisher again, not in the sense that his family gets murdered, that's already happened, but it's like they're scared to actually put him in the suit or in the shirt, even though he has got it at times. It's a mixed bag for me. And would I like to see more? Yes, but I would like changes to have been done. He was never going after street level villains in this. It was always sort of military, you know, the military had something to do with the death of his family, all this sort of stuff. So, and this is part of the problem, right? Because same with this film. In this, it's a revenge story. In this, it's done for revenge. In this, it's revenge, or it has been revenge. The only one that got his origin right is this. You see a flashback to his family being gunned down in a park. He's obviously in this, he's already established as the Punisher, whereas this is more of an origin story. And this is established, but his family got killed by a bomb underneath their car. So this is the issue, right? Is that, like I said, the Punisher, he's not on a vengeance kick in that sense, in that he knows who killed his family, because once he's killed them, I know in the films he carries on, but the comics he never knew who the killer was. Now I can't recall, but that may have changed later on, and they said this is the person that killed. But initially, the conception was his family's been murdered. He doesn't know who it was. It was just a random act of violence. So he fights a war on crime, and he would never know where he actually ever got the people that killed his family or not. Hence why he has to carry on and go on and on and on, because he never knows, right? So, yeah. Now, like I said, Tom Jane is my favourite. I know that will upset a lot of people, but he knew the character. He invested in the character. John Bernthal feels little invested, but not so much as Thomas Jane ever did. John Bernthal's performance is too bruisery, too rough, too, you know, sometimes comes across being dumb, you know, the way he talks and that. He's not a likeable Frank Castle. He's quite a good Punisher, but not a likeable Frank Castle, if that makes sense. Whereas Thomas Jane was a good Punisher, smart, you know, outwitted people, which the Punisher should be, because, okay, this is another side of the Punisher that I'm going to go into now. when the Punisher was first conceived, he was quite lean looking, much how he is in the picture behind. Not big and bulky, right? But the comics then later gave him that bulkiness, and John Bernthal comes more along that sort of line, whereas Thomas Jane doesn't. He's someone who is strong but has to rely on his wits as well to get him out of trouble and to take people down, which is what the Punisher's about. Now, the Punisher has never set the world alight in film, in the cinema. He's never made masses of money or that, and there's a reason for this that people don't realise, right? The Punisher's a product of his time, right? He was created, like I said, in the mid-70s, and around that time, just before, you had a lot of films that were these vengeance films. You had the Dirty Harry type stuff. Just after the Punisher, you'd have had Death Wish, all this filmmaking, that sort of, and the Punisher was a product of that. So he was inspired by film. He was a character inspired by what was going on in films at the time. Then as we get into the 80s, you came into the era of the Schwarzenegger and the Stallone action sort of films, that sort of film. And you saw a change within the comic version of the Punisher. At this point in the comics, he turned into that big, muscly sort of, you know, Schwarzenegger-esque, Stallone-esque type image, right? So again, heavily influenced by the films of the time, right? So by the time, 89, when the first Punisher film came out, it was a little film. It wasn't big, right? But by 2004, when you'd done the Thomas Jane one, where comic book movies were starting to come into their own, you'd had the X-Men start, you'd had Spider-Man start, you know, so you had Blade already. So Marvel were getting into it, and they were, you know, their properties were shipped out, and the 2004 Punisher came about. And like I said, it was a moderate success, but not massive, right? Now, what people don't realise, or the makers don't realise, is what you're doing is you're taking a character established or created from film, essentially. His origins are in film, and that's how he was created. And then you're taking this character who's always been inspired by films of the time and twisted him back into film in an era where the vengeance kick sort of films, although they still make them, are no longer massive business. I know Taken come along and that sort of thing, but yeah, they're not massive business. So you have a character inspired by film into comics, then they're trying to make a film out of the comics, and you have this sort of, you know, or a circle. So an era at a time, like I said, an era where those sort of films are not big, and that's the one of the problems with the Punisher. Also, the other problem is that he is, like I said, very one-dimensional. He's not. He, you know, he kills. That's it. He fights war and he kills criminals. End of story. That's about as far as it goes with the Punisher. There's no depth to him. There's no, you know, maybe a bit of mopiness about his family, but yeah. So, and that's, yeah. This is why the Punisher always been a hard sell. It has been a hard sell. Now, if the MCU decide to do a Punisher, maybe they'll get it right. We'll see. Anyway, that's my look at the Punisher in film. So, like I said, first off, the Punisher. 2004, Punisher. Punisher Warzone. Couple of films he guest starred in, animated films. Then came about in Daredevil Season 2, and then went into his own series. Steelbook, and I think I held the other Steelbook up. Yeah, so like I said, if you're interested in the Punisher and reading him, Welcome Back Frank is where you want to start. Good starting point. And if you're interested in the work print version or the extended cuts, the place you want to go is Germany. Amazon Germany. These are all Amazon German releases. Great place for stuff you can't get here in the UK or in America. So, that's my look at the Punisher on film. Hope you enjoyed that. Please consider giving me a thumbs up, hitting that like button, leave me a comment if you want to discuss Punisher. I know a lot of people won't agree with me on the the John Bernthal thing. I understand why, but I also understand that those people don't understand the Punisher. After reading for 30 odd years and collecting everything he's been in, I understand the Punisher. I understand what makes the character work, what doesn't make the character work. And Thomas Jane made this character work in film, even with the changes that were made. Thumbs up, Thomas Jane. Sorry we never got to see you again. But that's life. Anyway, this is AJ, getting away for the evening. Hopefully you'll subscribe. Hopefully we'll get to talk. Hopefully I'll see you soon. Thank you for watching. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye.